Hey guys, for today's video, I'll be going over Evernight's kits, relics and ornaments, Lightcones, Teams and Eidolons to show you how to reach your full potential. Starting off with their kits, Evernight is going to be another HP scaling remembrance character similarly to Castrus and Hyacine, so she's going to synergize extremely well with them. For her skill, it consumes 10% of Evernight's current HP to summon Eevee, her Memo Sprites, and increases crit damage of all ally Memo Sprites by 24% of Evernight's crit damage for 2 turns. In where the duration of this buff decreases by 1 at the start of each of Evernight's turns. This means that to maximize this crit damage buff for all ally Memo Sprites, you're gonna want to prioritize building Evernight with a ton of crit damage or using her with a crit damage providing supports like RMC or Sunday. Anyways, her skill also states that if Eevee is already on the field, restores 50% of its max HP and when used, gains 2 Memoria. Memoria are the type of stacks that Evernight is going to need to do a ton of damage with their special Memo Sprite skill, which is where the majority of her damage comes from, so pretty much her entire kit revolves around these stacks. Also, if in the Darkest Riddle states, which Evernight can get in after using her ultimate, she gains 12 additional Memoria. For her 240 cost ultimate, which is insanely expensive by the way, Evernight summons Eevee, then Eevee deals damage equal to 200% of Eevee's max HP to all enemies, and causes Evernight to enter the Darkest Riddle states. During this state, the damage received by all enemies increases by 30%, similarly to Triby's ultimate. The damage dealt by Evernight and Eevee increases by 60%, and both Evernight and Eevee are immune to crowd control debuffs. Evernight also gets 2 Darkest Riddle charges, which are important because Eevee will consume 1 charge after using Dream Dissolving as due, which is Evernight's special Memo Sprite skill that does a ton of damage. For her talent, it states that Eevee gets summoned with 160 speed and 50% of Evernight's max HP when she enters battle. It also states that each time Evernight or Eevee loses HP, increases crit damage for both of them by 60% for 2 turns, and gains 2 Memoria only once per target per attack, which is a pretty good crit damage buff that'll increase her DPS and the team's DPS as well, since again, she shares 24% of this crit damage when she uses her skill. It also states that when Evernight has 16 or more Memoria, dispels and becomes immune to crowd control debuffs. If Eevee is on the field, it immediately takes action, and the immediate action effect can only trigger again after Memo Sprite Eevee uses Dream Dissolving as due. Now, this last part is a bit confusing to interpret at first since it ties into her special Memo Sprite skills description, but all it means is that once Evernight reaches 16 Memoria, she immediately takes action, consumes her Memoria stacks to use her special Memo Sprite skill, and then resets the ability to immediately take action for the next time she has 16 or more Memoria stacks. Anyways, for her major traits, it states that Evernight and Eevee's crit rate increases by 35%, which synergizes really well with the 60% crit damage they get from her talents. It also states that when using abilities, consumes 5% of this unit's current HP to increase both their crit damage by 15% for 2 turns, which is actually insane for the uptime of Castrus' ultimate and Jingliu's enhanced states. Also, after Eevee uses Dream Dissolving as due, aka the special Memo Sprite skill, recovers 1 skill point for allies, which isn't really a necessary addition, nor is it an addition that synergizes really well with any other character, but it's definitely a nice addition since more skill points are always welcomed. For her other major traits, it states that at the start of combat, Evernight regenerates 70 energy and gains 1 Memoria, which will be useful for ultimate uptime since her ultimate costs a whopping 240 energy, and it'll also be decent for Memoria regeneration. It also states that when Evernight or an ally Memo Sprite uses an ability, Evernight regenerates 5 energy and gains 1 Memoria, which is insane for her ultimate uptime and insane for her Memoria regeneration. For her other traits, it states that for her skill, it increases all Memo Sprites crit damage by 5%, 50%, or 65% when there are 1, 2, 3, or 4 or more remembrance characters in the team, which is actually a ton of crit damage, especially when you consider that she's already providing 24% of her own crit damage to all allies. Now, even though it's a bit scummy how this major trace's full potential can only be reached in a team full of remembrance characters, as long as you get 3 remembrance characters, with Evernight included, on your team, you should be fine, since 50% crit damage is close enough to 65% crit damage. For her Memo Sprite skill, it states that Eevee selects a target, prioritizing the enemy target that Evernight last attacked. It deals ice damage equal to 50% of Eevee's max HP to one enemy, and for every 4 points of Memoria that Evernight currently has, further deals ice damage equal to 10% of Eevee's max HP. After use, Evernight gains 1 point of Memoria. Now, the skill is pretty mediocre, so it'll only serve as sub DPS. For her Memo Sprite talents, it states that Eevee is immune to crowd control debuffs, but has an increased chance of being targeted, which synergizes well with her other abilities that give Evernight buffs whenever Eevee appears and or disappears. Also, it states that while Evernight is on the field, increases damage dealt by Evernight and Eevee by 50%. For her other Memo Sprite talents, it states that upon Eevee disappearing, increases Evernight's speed by 10%, which synergizes with the previous talents I just mentioned. And if the disappearance is due to using Dream Dissolving as due, aka the special Memo Sprite skill, for each point of Memoria used in this attack, additionally increases Evernight's speed by 1%, counting up to 40 points of Memoria. The speed boost effect cannot stack and is removed at the start of Evernight's next turn, meaning that you can't really use this speed boost effect as an excuse to not build her with a ton of speed, since this talent is really only good at allowing Evernight to quickly restart her rotation rather than allowing her to have a lot of turns. And for her special Memo Sprite skill, it states that when Evernight's Memoria is greater than or equal to 16 points, and Evernight is not under a crowd control state, for each point of Memoria currently in possession deals ice damage equal to 12% of Eevee's max HP to the primary targets, and ice damage equal to 6% of Eevee's max HP to the other enemy targets. After use, consumes all Memoria and HP, and Eevee disappears. Again, this special Memo Sprite skill is going to do a tremendous amount of damage, and will typically mark the end of Evernight's rotation. Also, this skill will synergize with the previous talent I went over, since it'll allow Evernight to gain that 50% speed boost effect if she consumed 40 Memoria when using this skill. For her stats, she's gonna want your typical HP scaling DPS stats. She's gonna want anywhere from 7000 to 8000 HP, 134 speed, and a 1 to 2 crit rate to crit damage ratio. For her relics and ornaments, Evernight is gonna want the new Deliverer set because it's perfect for HP scaling, remembrance, sub DPS characters. It increases crit rate by 8%, provides 15% damage dealt for all allies, and increases the max HP of the wearer and their Memo Sprite by 24%. For an alternative, any mixture of 2-piece bonuses that provide ice damage, max HP, or crit stats will be good for her. For her planner ornaments, the Arcadia of Woven Dream sets will be her best because you'll be able to get 9% damage dealt for every Memo Sprite on the team, which, in Evernight's best teams, this will typically result in the max 36% damage dealt bonus. For an alternative, the Bone Planner would still be viable, since it increases her max HP by 15% and provides 28% crit damage. For another alternative, the Banana Planner would also be good, because it'll provide up to 48% crit damage, which will synergize well with Evernight's skill. For her main stats, she's gonna want crit damage or crit rate for her chest, speed or HP for her boots, ice damage or HP percentage for her sphere, and HP percentage or ERR for her rope. For her substats, prioritize getting crits, then HP percentage, then speed. For her Lightcones, her signature will be her best, since it provides 30% max HP, allows ally Memo Sprites to ignore 20% defense, provides 30% damage dealt, and provides 8 energy when the wearer's Memo Sprite disappears. For another option, Castress' signature will be pretty much as good, since it also increases the wearer's max HP by 30% and allows ally Memo Sprites to ignore 30% defense, but it also advances the wearer forward by 12% after the Memo Sprite disappears. For other options, the Lightcone, the Flower Remembers, and the Lightcone Sweat Now Cry Less will be on par with each other, with the Lightcone Victory in a Blink being a decent alternative to these options. For another option, you can also give Evernight's Hyacinth's Lightcone to increase Castress' ultimate uptime, Jingliu's enhanced state uptime, and Blades' follow-up attack stack regeneration. For another option, Aglaeus' signature will be decent because it provides up to 54% crit damage, which synergizes well with Evernight's skill. For 3-star options, both of the only available options are pretty good because they provide a ton of damage dealt or a ton of energy. For her teams, even though Evernight can be played as either a sub DPS or main DPS, with both playstyles, Hyacinth and RMC are going to be a must. Hyacinth can increase max HP, provide a ton of healing, and act as a remembrance character for Evernight's trace. RMC can provide a ton of crit damage that will synergize with Evernight's skill, provide a true damage buff, and act as a remembrance character for Evernight's trace. Still, if you don't have Hyacinth, you could just use a really good healer like Gallagher, Huohuo, or Lingsha. For the other slots, well, it depends on whether you're using Evernight as a main DPS or a sub DPS. If she's being ran as a sub DPS, well, Castris and Jingliu will be good because they'll benefit from Evernight taking her own HP. Castris' ultimate uptime will be increased if Evernight takes away her own HP, and Castris will have another Memo Sprite to take away HP from for her ultimate. Not to mention that the majority of Evernight's buffs only affect Memo Sprites, which Castris has. Jingliu will be able to gain 1 out of 20 stacks every time Evernight does an action, which will contribute to another synergy stack. Now, technically she could also be ran in a team with Blade or Medei, since the other characters on that team, aka Hyacinth and Trippy, will be able to synergize with both of them pretty well. But if you are gonna run a team like this, be aware that Evernight doesn't have much synergy with Medei or Blade, since her buffs only affect Memo Sprites, and Medei doesn't even want Hyacinth. Anyways, if she's being ran as a main DPS, well then Sunday will be the best, since he advances her an EV forward, provides a ton of crit damage that benefits the entire team because of Evernight's skill, provides a massive amount of additional damage dealt because Evernight has a Memo Sprite, and provides a ton of energy which Evernight desperately needs because of her ultimate costing 240 energy. For another option, Trippy will be second best because her sub DPS synergizes really well in a team filled with HP scaling characters. For another option, this option is mostly just a budget option since her use with Evernight is unconventional due to their mediocre performance together. But technically, you could get away with using Tingyun with Evernight since Tingyun provides a ton of energy which Evernight really wants. For other options, there isn't really another support that has a lot of synergy with her, so any character that is good like Cypher, Robin, Ruanmei, or Silverwolf will probably be good with her as well, and any other character that sucks like Asta, Hanya, or Yukong will probably suck with her as well. For her Eidolons, her E1 states that when Evernight is on the field, and when there are 4 or more 3, 2, or 1 enemy targets on the field, ally Memo Sprites deal 120%, 125%, 130%, or 150% of their original damage, respectively, meaning that the less enemies are on the field, the more damage your allies do, which is cool and all, but what matters the most is that this damage multiplier is actually insane, since it increases the original damage multiplier, which leads to this Eidolon giving around a 40% increase to her DPS. For her E2, it increases Evernight and Eevee's crit damage by 40%, and each time Evernight gains Memoria, increases the gain Memoria by 2 points, which is a nice amount of crit damage that once again synergizes with her skill. But what's really important here is the fact that her Memoria regeneration is increased by an insane amount, and because the majority of her damage comes from expending Memoria when using her enhanced skill, this alone is going to be insane and will increase her DPS by around 40% as well. Additionally, it states that when using her ultimate, additionally gains 2 Darkest Riddle State charges, meaning that not only do you get more Memoria stacks for her enhanced skill, but you also get to use it more than 2 times per ultimate. For her E4, it states that while Evernight is on the field, ally Memo Sprite's weakness break efficiency increases by 25%, and Memo Sprite Eevee gains an additional 25% weakness break efficiency, which, just like most E4s, this one is also mid. For her E6, it states that while Evernight is on the field, all allies' all-type breast pen increases by 20%, which will be nice if you're replacing Trippy on your team. It also states that after Eevee uses Dream Dissolving SDU, aka the special Memo Sprite skill, Evernight gains 30% of the consumed Memoria in this attack, which is really good for her Memoria regeneration and rotation startup. For my investing recommendations, I recommend pulling for Hyacinth's S1, then Hyacinth herself, then Evernight's E1, E2, then her Sig. Hyacinth's S1 increases Evernight's Memoria regeneration by a ton, and just helps pretty much every other HP scaler substantially. Hyacinth herself is a far better healer than the other current options, and she can contribute to Evernight's major traits that wants remembrance characters. Her E1 and E2 are actually broken for team damage, Memoria regeneration, and they both provide around 40% more DPS, while her Sig, although one of few options, doesn't provide anything that is as good as the Eidolons. Now, after going over all of this information, should you summon on Evernight? Well, Evernight is a premium slot in what is considered the meta team, with Castris, RMC, and Hyacinth. Not only that, but she's still a really powerful character as a main DPS, but she really needs Hyacinth, not because she's restricted to her or anything, but because she's an HP scaling character, which Hyacinth typically supports really well, unless your name is Medei. Thus, if you do want to pull for her because of her meta level performance, I would strongly suggest making Hyacinth your next pull priority. So I would recommend pulling for her if you really want a powerful sub DPS for Castris, or if you already have Hyacinth, since as long as you have Hyacinth, RMC, and Evernight, you can afford to have pretty much any other HP scaling DPS or powerful supports on your team and still do really well. Anyways, that's all I've got for today. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you have anything to say, feel free to leave it down in the comments below. I would greatly appreciate it. Goodbye.